much do you really know about the only star in our solar system, Old Sol? You probably learned in school that Old Sol is big and hot and 93 million miles from Earth. But that's just the tip of the iceberg, so to speak. Thinking about the sun reminded me of the strange case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, written by Robert Louis Stevenson. Those of you who've read it know that basically it's about the good Dr. Jekyll, who takes an experimental serum that turns him into a bad Mr. Hyde. As Hyde, Jekyll can do all the evil things he wants and then turn himself back into the good Dr. Jekyll so he can't be prosecuted. Much like Jekyll and Hyde, Old Sol has two sides. You could not survive on planet Earth, much less thrive, without the life-giving natural sunlight. On the flip side, Old Sol can kill you. Period. The sun's rays contain ultraviolet A and ultraviolet B radiation. Exposure to UVB triggers the skin to create vitamin D. Estimates are that in a 15-minute period of sun exposure while wearing a swimsuit, the skin will make 25,000 international units of vitamin D in very light-skinned individuals. 10,000 to 15,000 units in those who are well tanned, and 4,000 to 5,000 in dark-skinned people. Very dark-skinned people may need several times more exposure to sunlight to activate the desired amount of vitamin D, as compared with very pale skin. The Vitamin D Council recommends at least 5,000 to 10,000 IUs of vitamin D daily for an average adult. As their research suggests, this is the optimum amount the body needs for overall good health. However, as humans age, they often need more vitamin D. Many work indoors or sleep during the day due to shift work, or live in parts of the world where the amount of daily sunlight is quite limited, so they are often low on vitamin D. Bad news, because inadequate levels of vitamin D are linked with fatigue, osteoporosis, cancer, diabetes, high blood pressure, depression, and some autoimmune diseases. Doctors may suggest that these individuals take vitamin D supplements. Obtaining too little sunlight is linked with depression, including that seen in seasonal affective disorder. Brain plasticity in depression, regulated in part by brain-derived neurotrophic factor, or BDNF, also show a correlation with the amount of ambient sunlight. Exposure to light from Old Sol appears to trigger the brain to release serotonin, a precursor to the hormone melatonin that help you feel sleepy and then actually fall asleep. In the brain, serotonin functions as a neurotransmitter to impact memory and mood, helping you feel better. But in this case, what happens in the brain stays in the brain, meaning that the serotonin molecule doesn't cross the blood-brain barrier. Therefore, serotonin is also created in the digestive system. If you eat something that your body does not like or is toxic, serotonin is released in the intestines to help expel the toxic substance through diarrhea. Serotonin works best in balance. Levels that are too low or too high have been linked with many side effects, including suicidal thinking. And speaking of melatonin, some teenagers experience what is called sleep phase delay. their melatonin levels rise naturally at a later time. These teens find it difficult to fall asleep before 11 o'clock in the evening or midnight or later, which puts them out of sync with the rest of society. Sleep deprivation, compounded by early school start times, can negatively influence life in general and learning in particular for these students. Keeping lights dim as bedtime approaches and turning off electronics an hour before bedtime or wearing special glasses to block LED light can help. So can exposure to bright light as soon as possible in the morning. The human brain prefers to follow the sun's circadian rhythm. In the morning, as sunlight enters the eyes, your brain's 24-hour circadian clock is activated. It wakes up the body organs and instructs the pineal gland to stop secreting the hormone melatonin. At sundown, the SCN tells the pineal gland to start releasing melatonin again, which helps to promote a sense of being sleepy. In addition to regulating circadian rhythms, melatonin is linked with increasing the tumor fighting power of vitamin D by more than 25 times. That's right, 25 times. Unfortunately for this culture, exposing the brain to artificial light after sundown, especially blue wave light generated by electronics, can interrupt the release of melatonin, which negatively impacts sleep. A group of cells in the brain's hypothalamus, the SCN, or suprachiasmatic nucleus, is responsible for resetting the brain's 24-hour biological clock on a regular basis, a process known as entrainment. This occurs when light-sensitive cells in the retina at the back of your eye send electrical signals to the SCN. If natural light cannot get to the retina, the cycle of the circadian clock begins to lengthen beyond the usual 24 hours and a few minutes, which can be extremely disruptive to a person's life. You may have heard of the non-24-hour sleep-wake disorder, just one of several chronic circadian rhythm sleep disorders. Jet lag is an example of a circadian rhythm disruption. It puts the brain in conflict with a person's normal sleep patterns as the brain scrambles to adjust to crossing many different time zones. For some, it can take a day for every time zone crossed before the brain's circadian clock catches up. And then it gets discombobulated again when you take a return flight from halfway around the world. Jet lag often causes problems with effective thinking and efficient performance, to say nothing of fatigue and downright irritability. On boarding a plane, I set my watch to the time at my destination and start living that time zone. If I arrive at my destination during the day, I never take a nap. I just go to bed at my regular time. It's amazing how that helps. Symptoms similar to those of jet lag can occur when a person works rotating shifts, or when sleep times differ radically on weekends as the brain scrambles to adapt to shorter, longer, or irregular hours. While traveling through a game preserve in Africa, the guide kept a running commentary about how nature follows the sun's circadian rhythm, pointing out that at sunrise, birds twitter and tweet, wishing each other the best for the rest of the day. Creatures come alive and start looking for breakfast, while others sun themselves in the tall grass or on rocky ledges. Midday, things get pretty quiet for a while. save for the buzzing of insects that, worse luck, never seem to sleep. Now birds take a siesta. Creatures move to whatever shade exists or slip into their dens. Mid-afternoon and life is pretty active again until sunset, when birds and day creatures fall asleep. The guide said, quote, "This is how humans used to live too, before electric lights were invented. Not sure that has been of benefit to the human race as a whole. And daylight saving time, now that has really messed things up." End quote. He might have something there. Too little exposure to sunlight is bad. Too much exposure is bad too. The wisdom of avoiding sunburn from Old Sol is no longer up for debate. However, clear advice about how much sunlight is optimum is still under dispute. For sure, one size does not fit all. How and when you get exposure does matter. However, much better to avoid exposure to bright sun between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. if possible. If not, wear protective clothing along with hat or umbrella, sunglasses, and so on. Excessive or unprotected exposure to the sun's ultraviolet radiation is linked with premature aging, wrinkling of the skin, cataracts, and diseases aggravated by immune system suppression, allowing the reactivation of some latent viruses. So what is excessive exposure? Well, here the definition becomes a bit subjective, if not nebulous. Some definitions define excessive exposure as inappropriate amounts of exposure to the sun's ultraviolet radiation, UVR, for your skin type. So you need to know your skin type. Excessive UV rays can damage and alter DNA in cells of skin in almost any hue, which over time can develop into cancers, including melanoma. The Skin Cancer Foundation has cautioned about the dangers of tanning salons. The high-pressure sun lamps generate UV doses up to 12 times that of the sun. Estimates are that clients of tanning salons are 2.5 times more likely to develop squamous cell and 1.5 times more likely to develop basal cell carcinomas. In addition, a first exposure to tanning beds in one's youth can increase one's melanoma risk by 75%. Is a tan really worth that increased risk? And through it all, much like Old Man River, the only star in our solar system just keeps on shining along. Old Sol is both life-giving and death-dealing, helping things live and grow or killing them dead and burned to a crisp. Love it wisely. Sunshine matters.